1874, the podcast with Dan Bardell and Gregg Evans.
Hello, welcome back to 1874, the podcast. I'm your host, Dan Bardell, joined by the Athletics Global Gregg Evans to talk over yet another home victory for Aston Villa Football Club, 12 in a row at Villa Park now, Greg. But before we get into that, let's exchange some pleasantries. How are you?
I'm very well, Dan, thank you. Couldn't be going much better for you as a Villa fan, could it?
Mate, it is an incredible time to be a Villa fan. I went on BBC Football Daily last night and recorded their podcast, and after I'd finished talking, like, the way they were like, it's so nice to hear a supporter of a team talk about their team in such a positive way, because it's not something that happens all the time. Because I actually don't on the pitch, I don't have a bad word to say about the club, and you always might criticise a manager or players in some way. I literally don't have any of that stuff in me at the moment. I just feel like they were talking about Manchester United before and all the problems and why they're happening and how bad things are as a club for Manchester United. And I was just sitting there thinking, everything's brilliant at Villa with the manager, with the players. Like, this is the best time I've ever had as a Villa fan, I think, just in terms of because of the football I'm watching and how interesting it is.
Yeah, look, it's incredible, isn't it? The storylines that are coming out of Villa now, and there are probably two clubs in the Premier League that are sort of riding this wave of amazing emotion, and it's Villa and the leaders Tottenham, but Tottenham haven't sustained it over the period that Villa have. I think what's so impressive about Villa is that they're 2 victories away from a record-breaking. A sequence of a record-breaking amount of victories in a calendar year, and We've got 2 months left, and then the fact that they've won 12 at home, the fact that it's only Man City have won more games in 2023 than Villa have. This is over a real sustained period now, and there have been a few comments, on social media that Villa have struggled against the better teams in the division this year, that they were comfortably beaten by Newcastle and Liverpool. But let's not forget, Villa beat Newcastle equally as comfortably last year at the back end of last season. And they gave Liverpool a real good run for the money and stopped them from winning another home game themselves. So it's not like they're coming up against Luton and Sheffield United and Burnley every week. They're cruising past those teams, but also holding their own, I think, against the others. And yeah, look, those first those 2 games I mentioned, Liverpool and Newcastle, didn't quite go to plan. But Villa have got the home games to make amends, and I'm really excited to see what those games will be like, because there isn't a place anywhere. I don't think there's a place in Europe that's more feared than Villa Park at the moment. I think only
it's 5 teams, won 5 in a row.
I think Manchester City and Atletico Madrid, I think, are the only 2 teams that are on a longer consecutive winning run at home, or unbeaten run. I have to double check that, but it just shows the level Villa are performing.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about how perfect Unai Emery is. I am not perfect, and I forgot to say something about our sponsors, NordVPN, at the start of the show, so I will do that now and read it nicely here. You can grab your exclusive NordVPN deal by going to www.1874.io/NordVPN, and if you do that, you'll get a huge discount off a NordVPN plan, and you'll also get 4 months for free. It's completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee as well. So yeah, we'll hear more from NordVPN, well, me talking about NordVPN later. As Greg knows, we have to get into those intricacies of who's talking about NordVPN. But yeah, we'll hear more about our sponsors, NordVPN, later on in the show. Villa 3, Luton 1. Greg have comical own goal, in fairness, at the end of the game. But that's one criticism at the moment. It's a very minor one. We can't keep a clean sheet. Whatever we do, we seem to concede a consolation goal in every game. Unfortunate with the Bowen deflection the week before. Brighton scored a consolation in that game at Villa Park as well, and then just a bit of a comedy of errors at the end of the game against Luton. We can't keep a clean sheet, but it doesn't matter, because we only really concede 1 goal a game, and we're just so good in front of goal and score so many goals that conceding 1 goal a game, it actually has pretty much no impact on the club.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, does it? I mean, you can bet your bottom dollar Emery will be annoyed at it, because he wants absolute perfection. And look, you could see by Martinez's face that he was frustrated with it as well, even though he couldn't really do too much about it. Gonza felt a little bit embarrassed by the looks of it. And look, to be fair to Luton, they were awful, but they did have a little go towards the end, didn't they? Had a couple of corners, and Barkley had that chance, and one of the centre forward had a chance as well. So at the end, there was a little bit of a flurry, but I mean, never at any point in the game, and even before the game, if I'm being honest, did I fear that Villa would not get anything other than 3 points in that game. But yeah, I think in the 12 home games that Villa have won now in a row, they've only conceded 5. So it's 1 in 5 of those games. So, the fact that Villa are scoring 3 and 4 and 6 in some occasions has no bearing on those goals that they're conceding.
Yeah, you're right. Villa were in complete control without probably getting out of third gear.
Yeah,
I would say, really. I'm pretty sure this never happens, and I'm sure I've not noticed this before at Villa Park. But there's a moment in the game where the stats flashed up on the screen. I'm sure that doesn't normally happen. Yeah, it was like Villa 75% possession, 15 shots, Luton 1 shot. I think we were 2-0 up at the time. I was thinking that doesn't usually happen at Villa Park. I've never noticed that before. But Villa were just in complete control. I think Luton had a game plan. Didn't execute it terribly because I think they were tough to break down at times, but because Villa got the first goal in the first half relatively early, another lovely Austin MacPhee special. His value cannot be understated. I think Villa are so good from set pieces, and I never ever understand when I see anyone giving Austin MacPhee stick, because he's been a breath of fresh air at this club when he's been allowed to do his thing, which he has been for the last year under Emery. Villa have been so inventive from set plays and caused teams trouble, and I just think he's someone that flies a little bit under the radar. It was another nice routine, and I think getting that goal early-ish in the first half, it might have been a bit of a different game and a tougher game had that not happened. So that first goal coming when it did felt quite important to the tail of that game.
Yeah, I think so. We'll get on to Austin MacPhee after. Just on the game plan first, I think Luton perhaps made a mistake not going with 3 central defenders rather than the 2. It might have made it a little bit easier for them to restrict Villa. But I just think that first sort of 30 minutes, I think Villa had 80% possession in the first 30 minutes. And the way they were building up from the back and the way that they were just playing patiently, but at times with real poise and purpose, really made the difference. And it's games like that you appreciate Pau Torres. And I've been a little critical of him, some of the physicality issues that he's perhaps had in times where it hasn't quite gone to plan for him. But what I've always been consistent in saying is that Villa will have more games this season now because of the level of that they're operating at, where Torres' ball playing ability will help them, and I don't know his passing accuracy and statistics. I should have looked at it before we started the pod, but I can imagine it was pretty high. I don't think he misplaced many. If he had 100 passes, I reckon he might have misplaced 5. But I think the way that he was working and building forward was a real positive. What you could see was that Villa were dropping Kamara back into that sort of right-sided defensive centre-back role. The wing backs were pushing on. Luis Kamara were sitting quite deep, and they were building up with 5 and then attacking with the rest. And Zaniolo in the first half, and then Bailey when he came on played very close to Diaby and Watkins, and really caused some problems. I think Villa are managing their games quite well. It was probably a good idea to take Zaniolo off and bring Bailey on with those fresh legs at half time. Emery said after the game that it was because he was on a yellow card that came into his consideration. I think you've seen that later on in the game, didn't you, with Cash, and was it McGinn, I think, also was taken off.
I think McGinn was on still, but I don't think McGinn. Louise came off.
Cash and Louise were both on yellows. And it's just protecting it and managing it well. And what we're finding now with Villa is they're seeming to be really enjoying these sort of Thursday to Sunday schedules. It was something we highlighted before the season, wasn't it, that potentially would have been a problem. But I think with so many quality players in the team now, Emery's actually using it to his advantage, because he's giving every player that needs the minutes, the relevant minutes. And then when they're called upon, they're fit and fresh and ready. So it's working, yeah. And I mean, if you want to go into Austin MacPhee, I mean, yeah, I've been trying to explain some of the good work that he's done now, having spoken to players who really enjoy his working methods. Probably for about 12 months, actually. I think it was kind of since Unai Emery came in that he was really given a bit more authority. So, yeah, we are on the 1 year anniversary of Emery now, aren't we? So I think it's probably a good time to sort of just look back on MacPhee under Steven Gerrard, it was more a case of Gerrard and his coaching team would take the training sessions, and then set piece sessions were almost like, well, you've got to go and do them, but just go and spend some time with MacPhee then, and we'll get them done. There wasn't that full. There wasn't that full buy-in from players and coaching staff. Now, Emery over the years has made it's no secret that Emery thinks set pieces are really, really important. If you look back to some of his campaigns with Sevilla, there, and Villarreal even, they scored some really important goals from set plays. And Emery's training ground methods were a little bit different when he was in charge of set pieces. It was more a case of allowing the players to have a little bit of freedom to maybe instigate some of their own routines during training. But then when they got something that really worked, he would go over and over and over with it, pretty much in Emery style. And then when they went to the match day, it was a case of, right, remember that routine that we worked on, we're going to do that. With Austin MacPhee, they have a little bit more time sort of individually. So 5 or 6 players, Louise, Tielemans, Bailey, some of the stronger headers of the ball, which you're now seeing Konza. Obviously previously it was Mings and Buendia, and Watkins is very important when heading the ball. We'll have maybe 2 or 3 little 15-minute sessions, 20-minute sessions after training throughout the week. And then they'll have run-throughs on Friday where it would be a case of everything we've worked on, we're going to go through these individual routines. And I think the biggest compliment you can pay Villa now, Austin MacPhee, his analyst, the players, Unai Emery, who's overseeing it all, is that we're seeing something different and more creative almost every week, aren't we? And it doesn't always come off, but you're not going to score from every corner or attacking free kick. You're just not going to. But Villa just looked really creative, and it was another nice move yesterday. And I just don't think it's any coincidence that Villa are performing really well from set pieces, attacking wise, and are 5th in the league. And Scotland, who Austin MacPhee also works for, have now qualified for the Euros. With a couple of games to spare.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when Steven Gerrard did venture out of his office, which wasn't very often, but by the sound of things, the buy-in is the complete right phrase, because if the manager's not buying into the set piece coach, there's absolutely no chance the players are going to buy into it either. The players will have seen that Unai Emery has given him a bit more control and let him do his job, essentially. And the players must believe in what he does as well. There's a couple of the players when we scored the first goal. Luca Dean was one of them. I can't remember who the other one was. They made sure that they went over to Austin MacPhee and gave him a handshake, gave him a high five, because they know that routine has come from him. And Villa have had a few routines this season that they haven't scored from, but they've come close. There was that one against Brighton, I think got given as a foul, Diaby on the keeper in the end. But that was such an inventive routine. Okay, it didn't come off, and you can't do it again if it doesn't come off, because everyone knows what's coming. But every game there is something, and we're not the biggest team in the world either. That's the other thing. Villa aren't a massive team of giants. To get any joy off set pieces, probably have to be a little bit inventive, and they were. And that McGinn goal, I mean, they would not have been expecting that at all. McGinn to do what he did and score with his right foot as well. Diaby to dummy the ball. Teams can't prepare for that because it's invented for that specific game. So hats off to Austin MacPhee. I think he's been absolutely brilliant for Villa, and I will die on that hill that he's been an excellent addition to Villa's coaching team. And like you say, he's a big part of why Villa are doing well, and I think that gets seriously underlooked in certain quarters. Diaby was good, wasn't he, yesterday? Diaby involved in that goal, involved in the other two, obviously scoring one of them as well and getting an assist for an own goal. I actually thought Villa's 3 best players yesterday were all relatively new players. I thought Torres, Diaby and Kamara were Villa's 3 best players yesterday. I didn't notice Louise as much as I normally do. Not to say that he had a bad game, but he's usually at the forefront of what we do, and I didn't feel like he was. Yes, I felt like Kamara was a bit more of the forefront. And that, to me, I almost think it's probably planned in some weird way, that Emery probably says to Louise, you maybe take your foot off the pedal a little bit in this game. You're on the pitch, but let Kamara do his thing a bit more in this game. I feel like Emery's so on it that kind of thing could have feasibly happened.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously don't know some of the finer details of the game plan, but I think what you can pick up just from obviously watching from watching the game is that Kamara was a little bit more involved because he was dropping maybe a little bit deeper and just getting on the ball a little bit more, wasn't he? He was almost a centre half, wasn't he?
It was.
When
They were
Villa were
building
in
up in the back
possession.
three. They
Yeah,
Conser went
so,
shifted to the middle, and Kamara went to the right, and there was almost Louise in front of the back three.
and then
Watkins up top on his own. Diaby was just pulling wide right, pulling wide left. McGinn and Zaniolo came in to make that box with Louise, and were picking the ball up in really good positions. This is the thing, and I said this on BBC last night, that Villa don't change 4-4-2 off the ball. They don't change. That's how they do. It's on the ball where there's all these different intricacies every week. Villa must be a nightmare to play it, like plan for going forwards,
yeah.
and it tells with the amount of goals we've scored. Just because there is these differences every single game. The off the ball never changes from that 4-4-2, but on the ball there is something different every single week, and that must be a nightmare for the opposition.
Yeah, and look, that's what that's what the manager has to stay on top of. He has to have that sort of sprinkling of enterprise almost every week. It has to be just that little bit different. Otherwise, teams perhaps will start to work Villa out if they're the same every single week. So yeah, I just think the departments are all set up now. Villa, no, you look at Villa and you think how they're going to play, how they want to play. There's a clear identity there, so that helps. The players know their roles and responsibilities. When players come in, they're equally as good as others. So there's a good squad there, a good squad of players. They know exactly what they've got to do as a collective, and then if a team figures them out somehow, Villa then still have the individual brilliance to go and change a game. I just look back at the West Ham game when just after West Ham had scored, they went for a decent period of possession and looked to be quite threatening. But then Villa flew up the other end and scored with that brilliant Watkins goal, and it just seems like they've got a mixture of collective cohesion and individual brilliance, and then on top of that, you've got the freestyling almost from set plays. And I think as we've spoke about Austin MacPhee, any set piece coach will have his own playbook of routines, and that perhaps is what's going to set them apart. How creative and personalized is that playbook, but you have to have the full buy-in before you can start putting that into action. You have to have all the players on board wanting to do it. You have to have the manager coming down off the main training pitch into the set piece area and overseeing it and fully, reminding the players this is what MacPhee or whatever set piece coach from any other club wants to do. Listen to him, and then the players listen to the manager a little bit more. But I think Villa have got that belief now for a real solid body of work over 12 months, where they know that if they listen to the manager and his coaches, then they're capable of going and executing the game plan. It just seems to be working brilliantly for them.
Just on MacPhee again, this is turning into the Austin
MacPhee
loving. He absolutely loves this Austin MacPhee if he's listening, and I'm not sure he does. I'm not sure he does listen, but. Who's the only other person that's allowed to stand up in the technical area?
Yes, I have mentioned this a few times actually, because in previous reportings I did a big piece on set pieces, and I was really intrigued because some set piece coaches stand up, but others don't, and it's all down to the manager. The manager, especially in Emery's case, who really does rule the roost, and it's his direction. So as you'll see, you won't see any of his assistants standing up, but MacPhee, from what I understand, has the authority to dictate or organise from set pieces. But that's down to the manager. That's not MacPhee getting ahead of himself and saying, "Look, I'm going to do this." That's the manager saying, this is your baby. You come and do it. It was interesting hearing Ange Postecoglou, wasn't it, at the weekend? On Monday, said that Mile Jedinak, obviously a former Villa player, has taken on the set piece sort of roles and responsibilities at Tottenham now as well. Yeah, so I just wonder whether he's picked up anything off working with Villa, and whether we'll see Tottenham kicking on in that department.
Before we continue, have we got anything else on Austin MacPhee that we want to talk about?
Got lovely hair, hasn't he?
Well, yeah. A magnificent man. I think back to when he first came in, and Dean Smith was obviously the manager at the time he came in. I used to find it. I just find it really entertaining every time we had a free kick or a corner or a throw in, and he'd get up and he'd come and have his say. You used to find that really entertaining, but now it's like he is arguably. I don't know. He's arguably the second most important person there because he's allowed to do that stand up in the way the rules have changed. Honestly, I keep repeating myself. I think he's absolutely brilliant.
Well, I agree, and I've been trying to sort of explain this in a more detailed way in some of my reporting, and I just think set piece coaches in general, they're on a bit of a hide into nothing when they walk out of the dugout, when they walk out their seat, and they're trying to organise a defensive corner. The best thing that can happen is that they don't concede. Right, that's at a defensive corner or free kick, and the worst thing that can happen at a offensive corner or free kick is that they don't score, and that almost happens all the time. So it's so difficult. You just think you've got these guys that are, because it used to happen at Man United. I can't think of the set piece coach's name now, but he used to step out quite regularly, and you just think, if the fans get to know this guy, and for Villa, and with MacPhee, it was a bit more in your face because of his appearance, wasn't it? You can't miss him when he's out there because of his long hair. He stands out in the dugout, and you just almost feel a bit sorry for them because they're on a hide into nothing if it goes wrong, and the absolute best thing that can happen is they either score or don't concede.
Yeah, he does stand out. Also, I had a very brief conversation with him at the Player of the Year awards. The one he's actually a really funny guy.
Was it? Yeah,
I found him very, very entertaining with the way he was telling stories and talking stuff. Austin MacPhee, new contract. Let's make this happen on this show.
We've got the title anyway.
yeah, but we haven't spoke about anything else. I wasn't even envisaging that we mentioned this, but it just turned into an Austin MacPhee love you on this podcast this week. So Diaby, let's talk about Moussa Diaby. I mean, he was the key player in the game, wasn't he? Involved in all three goals. Stepping over for the first one, scoring the second, and then assisting for the Lockyer own goal for the third. How well have Villa done to get this guy in? Because there's a lot of so-called bigger clubs that have spent a hell of a lot of money on that type of player. I know he's playing up front, but he's a wide player essentially. Diaby, teams Chelsea, Manchester United spent a lot of money trying to get efficient, effective wingers in, and they've not managed to do it, I would say. You'd think of Man U with Sancho and Anthony, not really hit the ground running at all at any point, not really had a consistent run of form. Villa have got this guy in, and he just looks like he's been playing the Premier League all his life. He looks like he's been at Villa all of his life as well. He's absolutely electric. I'm trying to think of the last player Villa have had that I would describe as being electric.
He's got to be Gabby in his prime, hasn't it?
There's the trickery as well to go with it. And I felt Gabby was quick, probably the quickest player I've seen.
Actually, young he's different though, isn't he? He's a different type of player.
Yeah, he's probably, it might even be Tony Taylor.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar, isn't he?
I can't think of with his pace combined with his dribbling ability. He's a good finisher as well. That finish he scored a couple of his Newcastle goal on the first day.
Was great,
made that look easy. His finish against Burnley first time, that was a really good finish.
Yeah.
That was a good finish drilled into the corner on Sunday as well. I can't think of a player really that Villa have had in my lifetime like him.
No, there's no. I'd love to give you the name. There isn't one. There really isn't one. And he's got a mixture of great traits. Which he's got a mixture of Ashley Young in him. He's got a mixture of Gabby in him with his pace. He's brilliant finishing. He's got a bit of a Kevin Phillips in him with his finishing, hasn't he? He's fantastic.
Phillips, what a bizarre name to call out.
I was thinking of good finishes. Kevin Phillips certainly was one.
Oh, you've been covering so much other Midlands to have come up with Kevin Phillips as the first name in your head.
Oh dear, but yeah, we're going off track here, aren't we? But no, look, Villa needed to get that one right. I felt because they've signed a lot of wingers over the years who have cost them a fair bit of money, but haven't fully delivered. Said this over and over, but
Bailey's getting close now as well.
Bailey's getting close, but it's taken him 2 years. So it's a valid argument that Bailey hadn't performed up until now. Bailey's another one who's performing really well. Really, really impressed with him, and he's getting a lot of goals, isn't he? Which is great. But I just think for Diaby, it was a big signing they needed to get it right. It was Emery's first one, first real big one in certainly in the attacking areas anyway. And the fact that he'd leaned on some support from the data and recruitment team. Rob McKenzie, obviously, who's head of recruitment, and his staff played a part in it because we all know that Emery tried to get Nico Williams from Atletico Bilbao. He was the first choice, but
how good must he be, by the way, if he was the first choice?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, look, I feel like I'm repeating myself sometimes.
Yeah.
In football, sometimes your second, third, fourth, fifth choice end up better than your first. It's just how it works. You never know how it's going to pan out. And look, the bottom line is Diaby's been brilliant for Villa. And from that first game at Newcastle, I really fancied it. I thought he would change this team, and he has. And I think heaven forbid one of the two of them get injured, because Watkins and Diaby, they really work together great as a pairing. But the fact that Villa now do have Zaniolo and Bailey in good form, it feels like it's not too damaging if they do, but you just want to keep it as it is.
Yeah, still got Ramsey to come back as well. If you throw him into that as well,
Ramsey instead of Zaniolo, I mean, that'd be strong, wouldn't it?
Ramsey's some player as well, especially with the way he carries the ball as well, and his physicality and his close control. It looks like he's running through water, gliding almost. Ramsey does with the ball. You add him into that mix as well, and this is the amazing thing. And I'm repeating myself here because I've been saying this for weeks. Villa have done what they've done with 4 really important players not kicking a ball, really.
Yeah.
That is staggering. I feel like we lost a couple of games at the start, and people not lost their minds, but there was people asking questions saying, not the wheels fell off, but are we as good as we thought we were going to be? We've obviously ended the last season well, and I just feel like since that Liverpool game, it was almost like we're never going to encounter problems, because when we do have a problem, Emery just seems to come up with a solution for everything. I don't think it's rich to say, as much as I'd love to have had those 4 players available, we haven't really missed any of those players. When you look at how well we're doing, would we be any higher if those 4 had been fit? Probably not.
I don't think.
Don't get me wrong.
Look, you want Moreno back, you want Mings back, you want Ramsey back, and I suppose to an extent you want Buendia back. Yeah, of course. Well, you want them all back, yeah, and it strengthens the bench for sure. I don't think there would have been any higher. I don't think any of the games would have gone any other way, really. I feel like Emery is brilliant. He always finds a way of getting the job done, doesn't he? And look, it's a lot on the players. They've got to go and execute it themselves. And look, they were a very good group of players before Emery came. Remember, they just needed that coach, that elite level coaching to pull it all together. But look back to the Palace game, where they scored 3 goals in the last 10 minutes. In another day, Palace could have held on to that. But you never fear it, do you? Then you always think they'll get a job done. And even in Europe and the home game where it wasn't against the Bosnian team, forget the name. It didn't. Yeah, irrelevant, aren't they?
Oh, let's not be too quick with that. We have got to play them again, Greg.
Didn't feel like. You just always knew it would come. Certainly when I was watching it, I just knew it would come. And they go about it in the right way now. They don't rush it. And the real changing point, and I remember writing about it for The Athletic at the time in real detail, was the 4-2 defeat to Arsenal. In some ways, that's the best thing that could have happened to this Villa team, because they were drawing 2-2, and then all of a sudden the game plan went out the window, and they were not listening to what the players were not listening to what the manager wanted them to do, and they were kicking the ball long. They weren't patiently building out from the back. They weren't maintaining possession and controlling the game, which Emery talks about so regular. And they got a real dressing down after that game, and since then it's turned around. It took a little bit of time after, but since then, that was the real turning point for them. And sometimes, and I'm not saying Villa were at rock bottom, but they were in a difficult place at that point, because they'd lost to Leicester, they'd lost to Arsenal. There was the humiliating defeat to Stevenage, and it was just building up, and there was a slight change of narrative beginning. And we were thinking, Emery's come in and steadied the ship, but they're going back downhill at the moment. And sometimes a team just needs that rude awakening to,
I think you're right,
to get back. And they certainly have been brilliant since.
Yeah, so it is an incredible time to be a Villa fan. I just look forward to going every week, and I spent so much time of my life. I'll always go, and I've always wanted to go, but there's a different feeling when you're entering the ground now because you've actually got some belief and you've got some expectation because Emery has just changed this whole football club. I've said this a few times as well. I don't think I've said it on this show that Unai Emery. You look at the job he's done in coaching the players and improving the players, but you just talk about the Arsenal game. He almost has had to coach the fans as well.
Yeah.
Because the fans
If you
in
remember,
that game,
they
they weren't happy
they
with the
weren't
plan out
having
from
that.
the back. It was
No,
antsy.
no, no,
Now
no.
you don't see, and sometimes they Villa do cut it fine with some of the stuff they're doing, but there's no noise, no audible noise from the fans
No.
at all when that happens because
There's
there's just
pure
complete trust.
belief now.
Yeah.
There's pure belief now, and it wasn't there before. There was. I remember walking out of some games, and there were supporters complaining. Why are we playing this crap style out from the back? It's too, it's boring. It's too risky. Get the ball forward quickly. That's what we want to see in exciting football.
All those things that made Villa rubbish for years.
Yeah, and you're just thinking, well, it hasn't really worked previously. And even in the area by the press box where I sit, there was a lot of whinging around that time, but it's certainly changed now. And I think if you're a Villa supporter, what's great now if you're a Villa fan, especially if you go quite regularly to the away games, is you like Alkmaar, for example. You meet up with your mates, you look forward to the day before the day of the game, and before in years gone by, the game was the worst part of the experience.
Let the whole day down.
It just ruined it. It's like you go out, you meet your mates. Some of you would have a good drink and that, others wouldn't, but you'd have a sing song. But you'd never be like anticipating going to the game. It'd almost like we've got to go to the game, and it would ruin it for people, and it'd be the worst part of the day. But now it's just adding and enhancing the experience. And Villa fans have got a bit of arrogance about them, now, because they go into the games, they're happy, they're excited, and they know that their team is going to back up how proud they are of being supporters and get the job done.
Yeah, it's like I keep saying it's an amazing time and nothing I've ever experienced. I'd love us to achieve something ultimately, but I think we've already in 12 months of Emery, we've already achieved a hell of a lot, qualifying for Europe and just like I say, getting that feeling of just enjoying going to the games again and having that arrogance. And obviously, I talk about Villa quite a lot in everyday life and going on various outlets to talk about Villa. I feel like even I've picked up it's not even arrogance. I don't know what the word is, but I've just got such belief. I've always been tried to be positive about Villa, but I feel like I can be positive about Villa now. And there's a ton of things to just back it up. Adam just wrote in the chat, I didn't even know he was watching the producer. He said, confidence, question mark. And it is a confidence. Yeah. I feel like if I go on and wax lyrical about Unai Emery and Villa, it's going to be backed up with what everyone else is saying and what the wider world is saying. I mean, if Villa were under the radar maybe a few weeks ago, that's the only thing now. They're not under the radar now, are they? Because they're closer to first than they are to dropping down one place to sixth. So we're not under the radar anymore.
It's amazing, isn't it? And look, I think in football, there's nothing wrong with a bit of arrogance in the right way, channeled in the right way. It's how we frame it, confidence, arrogance, however you want to look at it. It's like football players. The best ones have a touch of arrogance because they need it. And I'm not saying a set of supporters need that, but sometimes when conversations and arguments and debates between supporters often get so heated and, having something to fall back on, which Villa now clearly have. They have a body of work over a year now to fall back on. And, the likes of Liverpool and Man City and Man United might laugh at that and say, well, it's only a year. But, a solid year is enough to have to be allowed to be a little bit arrogant about your team and to be able to sort of, shout from the rooftops about how good they are, because Villa are now. And I think, they're going into games and they're expecting to win. They're just ticking off all the boxes as well. We said only a couple of months ago, the concerns were, can they do the Sunday to Thursday schedule? Yeah, they can. I think they can now. I think we've almost ticked that box off. There's a bit of a way to go, but
they can. Right.
They're managing it well for me. I'm not seeing any signs of tiredness or sluggishness or game plans going to pot because of it. They're executing the plan well. what now is the most important thing? How far can Villa go? Do they have to go and deliver an FA Cup this year, or the Conference League, or a top 4 finish? I think if you get a top 4 finish like Newcastle did last year, that still trumps winning the FA Cup, or
I've changed my mind on this.
winning the Conference League for me now. And I think because you can then safely say that you've had an unbelievable season, first and foremost. You can then say you've improved on last season. You've now got the increased revenue, which allows you to buy even better players next year and helps make the club more sustainable moving forward and get you in the picture a little bit longer and more for the long term.
Yeah.
And then you've also got these exciting nights to look forward to, like Newcastle are experiencing now against Dortmund and PSG and AC Milan. You're just playing a slightly higher level of teams. And I'm not being funny now, but if you look back to the game, the last game of last season, Dan, when Villa secured the Conference League.
Brighton.
Think of the celebrations on that day, right? And the euphoria around the place. Now, that felt almost like a final. Do you know what I mean? That felt like a final win. So you get that feeling of okay, and I'm moving that forward. If Villa get to the stage where they can do that to finish in the top 4, that feeling of securing top 4. I'm convinced. Top 5, excuse me. Yeah. Would feel at that right given time as good as winning an FA Cup.
Yeah, I have always been for years, especially, been asked the question, because people assume that at some point we will win a trophy because it's Unai Emery. And I think people think we'll go a long way in the Conference League, and I think we will as well. But I've always been trophy. Give me a trophy over Champions League football, because I want to see us win something, because I haven't seen it since I was 10, and I want to experience us winning a trophy. Sat next to my dad, he's getting older. I want to see those things. But the more I think about it now, and it's easy to say when you are sat in the top 5, and Villa have, in my lifetime, been in a position where it looked like they might get Champions League football before, and it obviously fell through under O'Neill. But if you win the FA Cup, let's say, it gets you a place in Europe. That at the end of it, yes, you've got that trophy, but at the end of it, it gets you into the Europa League, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the FA Cup, if you finish in the top 5, it's not a trophy, but it gets you Champions League football, which elevates the club to a completely new stratosphere. And now it opens up new markets. It opens up new players. Like, it makes you more financially viable. The income that you're going to take in from that competition is an elite competition with the big boys. So almost the knock-on effect from finishing in the top 5 is bigger than the knock-on effect of winning a trophy. Now, these owners are so engaged. But in all fairness, they probably haven't come to Villa thinking, we want to win a trophy. The owners have probably come in thinking, we want our team to be in the Champions League.
And win it ultimately. Those are the ambitions.
We've done it before, Greg, as you well know, a different time, obviously. But do you know what I mean? I just feel like that knock-on effect of, if we did finish, all we've got to do is stay where we are now, which is easier said than done. If we can stay where we are now, it does feel now to me it's a bigger thing, because I think it feels real. I did say at the start of the season that I think Villa can finish in the top 4, top 5. I did really feel that, and then those injuries happened, and we lost a few games, and you did start to think this might be tough. I thought Mings would be a huge miss. I was like, there's going to be some problems here, but Emery has just completely adapted it, and we just look like a serious outfit. We really do, and I remember the feeling at the end of the season when we kept winning games. It looked like we might get into Europe. I think how we are now has surpassed that, because what I'm watching, I just think Villa are a proper team, and these players are good enough to qualify for the Champions League. The manager, even if you want to disregard everything else, that manager wants to be involved in elite competition. He wants to be in Champions League football. If you're to keep Unai Emery, and not keep him engaged, because he'll always be engaged, but if you want to guarantee that you keep this manager, who is going to end up being one of the best things that's ever happened to Villa, we have to be in the Champions League, because that's what he wants, and that he is that standard of manager, I'm afraid.
Yeah, 100%. The start to the season, you analyse the way Villa are playing, they're good enough to at least finish where they are now.
Yeah,
they've proven that already. They're good enough to finish there. There are going to be bumps in the road at some point. There are going to be injuries, perhaps suspensions. The amount of games that Villa are going to play, I still think at some point might hurt them. If it doesn't, fair play to them. They've already proved to me that that they've already proved that they can do it so far. Can they sustain it over the course of the season? That's the next challenge. How strong are the teams around them going to be? I don't think Villa are quite at a Man City and Liverpool yet. I think, and perhaps maybe Arsenal. Tottenham, I want to see more of them this season to know where they're at.
Yeah.
Newcastle, they're going to be right. They're going to be right there, aren't they? They've got a great squad. They're going to be right there.
Their injuries are piling up at the moment. They've got about 5 fullbacks on their bench.
Yeah, look, exactly. But at some point, that could happen to Villa. They could have 3 midfielders out at some point, and all of a sudden, you're looking at it's.
But it already has happened to Villa. Like that's the thing. It's happened, and we're still where we are. Those injuries have happened. I'm not saying we won't get another.
I don't think Villa have ever been. The injuries have occurred. I don't think Villa have ever been down to the real bare bones where you think we're going to have to put a midfielder at centre back or something like that, or like a.
I don't think a Premier League team at the highest level should really ever get to that point. I don't think Newcastle won't get to that point. But if you look at their bench at the moment, I think it was Target,
it's quite
Lewis Hall, that's 3 left backs.
Yeah, it's stretched, but and inevitably all teams sort of have that across the course of the season, and there will be a point where it will be a bit stretched for Villa, and how they get through that will be important. But yeah, look, the takeaways are they're performing as good as their league's position suggests, if not better. They now have the confidence and the momentum and the platform already to go and kick on, and the points advantage ahead of others. I think they're in a much better place than your Man Uniteds and your Chelseas, who have always been bigger teams than Villa over more recent years, but the tide is slightly starting to turn. I want to see more of Tottenham, and I don't quite think they're as good as the other 3, Arsenal, Man City and Liverpool, just yet.
No, I agree. I think the top 3 is Man City, Arsenal and Liverpool. And then I'm unsure of Tottenham. They're doing brilliantly. What a start they have had. We're sat here talking about how good Villa start's been. Postecoglou's done amazing to turn that around, because they finished below Villa and they're top of the league.
Yeah,
now, that's ridiculous.
And the fact they don't have Europe, that might help them.
And they've lost their best player.
So, that's just ridiculous. That very rarely happens,
to Tottenham. Yeah, come on, that's a hell of an achievement and Postecoglou just seems like an absolute legend as well.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. So fair play to Tottenham, But I just think, I don't know. To be fair, maybe it's a bit disrespectful of us to say we want to see more of them. I'm really interested by our game there. That's coming up. That's going to be a hell of a game, Tottenham v Villa, because probably 2 teams that are really in their manager's mould at the moment coming up against each other. It'd be really interesting to see what happens that day. That does us for the Luton kind of review. It's obviously we've delved into other things as we go, but it's important to say that Gregg and I don't really have a plan what we're going to talk about. Just kind of do it off the cuff and see what happens. We could do with an Unai Emery figure above us, really, telling us what to do. We're just going out there with no tactical plan whatsoever, but we seem to be making it work just about. Before we crack on, let's hear a little bit more about NordVPN. 1874 is proudly sponsored by NordVPN, so when the Villa are playing and you can't watch it, we want to help you. NordVPN is a secure and private service which works on pretty much any device, including your laptop, mobile and your smart television. So if you want to watch some live content, it allows you to appear like you're in another country. And whilst you're connected, no one else can find out what you're doing, including your internet service provider. Beyond this, the service also has threat protection baked in to protect you from intrusive website ads and malware, which is pretty handy for you. As part of NordVPN supporting 1874, they have given us an exclusive deal of up to 65% off and 4 months for free. This also includes Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. All you've got to do is go to 1874.io/NordVPN and sign up. All the details are also in the description. Also, this November, NordVPN are also promoting Movember, which is a charity based in the UK which raises money to help fight mental health, suicide, prostate cancer and testicular cancer. All are amazing causes, and NordVPN has added a donation feature to their checkout which enables new users to donate £1, £5 or £10 or whatever the customer decides to donate. And even better, NordVPN will match every donation. As always, we're very grateful to anyone that signs up. We know that money is tight, but if you think NordVPN will help you out, it will also help keep the channel running and help us too. Gregg, just wanted to talk about a couple of Villa's loan. Well, actually, they're not a couple of loanees. One is a loanee, Louis Barry. Really bad injury. He was having a really good time down in League Two with Stockport, but he's picked up a bad injury that's going to rule him out for some time.
Yeah, really disappointing for the lad actually, because he'd had a couple of failed loan spells previously, and he's finally got the right one at Stockport. Had been doing really well, given the responsibility to be the penalty taker as well. So he was adding to his goals in that area, and has now sustained this injury that's going to rule him out for the season. So yeah, real blow for him. Just so sad to see youngsters who just really need that chance, don't they, to go and kick on and then be thwarted like that. And it will be disappointing for Villa as well, because from a business point of view, this was a player that they had who was growing significantly in value with the goals that he was starting to score. But yeah, disappointing. Hope he gets back to his best when he's finally fit again.
I always think it's a shame when a young player gets a really bad injury, because it can really affect their development, and it completely changes the direction in which their career goes. Like, I mean, look, Buendia and Mings' injury, no one likes to see stuff like that, but they've already developed and done well in their careers and made it. For Louis Barry, that significant injury that could completely change the trajectory of his career and the direction it goes in. So I always think it's a real shame when a young player picks up a really bad injury. So we wish Louis Barry well and hope that he returns soon.
The one thing I would say, the one not positive, but because everything he's going to be hard for him at the moment, but what he has done in this short period on loan at Stockport, he's shown that he can score goals consistently at this level and deserves a step up next year. Yeah. So whatever would have happened this season for the remainder of this season, and look, he might have gone on and scored lots of goals. He might have stayed at Stockport. He might have come back to Villa and got a bigger move at that point. But whatever I think happens now, he's going into next summer when he will hopefully be fully back to fitness. He will be able to get a better loan move or a permanent move.
Yeah, kind of protected as well to an extent, because he's had that new contract recently as well, which Villa are good at looking after young players in fairness, whatever happens. But he'll feel if you say if his contract was up at the end of the season and he's had that injury as well, that kind of things happen to players, the young players that Villa have brought in, actually, where they've had a bad injury and they've ended up leaving the club having never really gotten a chance to do anything. The lad from Norwich, his name's completely gone.
Ruben Chatpoke.
Yeah, he never got a chance really to kick a ball.
No,
for Villa.
He's at West Brom now, I think.
I don't know where he's gone.
Somewhere in the Midlands. Yeah, I think.
I knew he'd left Villa, but his bad injuries, they completely changed the direction of which his career was gone. And then he's out of contract, having never really got a chance to prove himself. So at least from that perspective, Louis Barry's protected, and my mate did his blinds in his house as well, so he's got nice blinds in his house for his recuperation as well. Philogene, not really on loan, although he does feel a little bit like he is on loan at Hull, because he seems like such a talent. It feels like someone that Villa might bring back in the future. Scored an absolute worldie the other day, running half the length of the pitch. Just amongst the goals at Hull are going pretty well as well. Scoring against Blues, which is always nice to see. He's making a good fist of his move in the Championship. And I was speaking to you about this earlier. You got some stuff around the fee that you wanted to talk about.
I mean, yeah, it felt like £5 million that Villa got back for him was quite low. But I think what you got to remember is Villa paid nothing for him, took him out of an amateur academy, and managed to get that fully back as profit. But because they put the buyback clause into the deal, obviously the fee was structured around that. It couldn't have been too high, because the fee that Villa would then have had to pay to get him back would have been even higher. So it was something that was all put together between the two teams. And while it might on the surface seem a little bit low, it was with one eye on the future, that Villa don't want to pay too much if they want to get him back in the future.
Yeah, let's finish then with the press box archives, Greg, and an apology from you before we start.
Yeah, it's very slack for me. Forgetting.
I mean, usually you've got a lot going on. Yeah, I've got a lot going on, in fairness.
For the second week running, I forgot to prepare for this, so apologies. Yeah. I'm going to push it over to you from your years of experience in the press box.
I've been in the press box about 3 times in my life. It's just a tale from the away end for me, because this is a story from the away end as well. I thought about it earlier when we were talking about how good the players were and stuff like that. I've only remembered this because I saw him yesterday, actually. So I saw Matty Cash's dad when I was walking around yesterday, and had a brief conversation with him. And I remember Watford away, Villa got thumped. Like Sarr absolutely murdered Matt Target that day. And Villa it was just a real off day. Yeah. It was a shame. It was the first away day since COVID. Everyone was so excited, and we got there, and it was just terrible. You're talking about like the game ruins the day. I was having such a nice time, and then the game did just completely ruin the day. that day. So I was sat there with Dolan, and someone came over to speak to us, a Villa fan, and he was talking about how bad it was, basically. And he was laying into Matty Cash a bit, saying,
Right.
Matty Cash was terrible, you know. I don't think he's a Premier League player. I think he might be a Championship fullback. This guy turns around in front of me and went, I'm his dad. And I thought he was rubbish today as well. it was Matty Cash's dad. So I saw him yesterday, and I had a little chat with him. And I just thought, and in the Wolves game, the Wolves away the other week, I was around some of the players' families, and Diego Carlos's family was there. Douglas Luiz's family wearing all the shirts, so you clearly knew, they were part of their family, and just thinking the difference they must feel being sat in a away end with the Villa fans now, like how free and how proud that they must feel, because it wouldn't have always been like that. I'll tell a kind of another story. I sat by Conor Harahan's brother for a game, Brentford away, and he missed a 1-on-1, and we were going through a real rough patch at the time. We were awful, and he should have scored, and he was getting pelted by the Villa fans, and I was sat by his brother just thinking, God, this must be awful, absolutely horrible to have to sit there and listen to people like talk about your brother like that. Fair play to him. He didn't react. He took it all in his stride. But just how far we've come now, and the difference. The players' families just visibly sat there like wearing the shirts and of their family member, and just people coming up to them and saying how much they love their son and things like that. Like it's night and day,
isn't it? Yeah, there was another example like that actually. At Bournemouth away on the opening day of last season when Villa lost 2-1, there were a couple of supporters really upset. Some members of the McGinn clan as well, with various things. So it's difficult for family members. I think they really have to sort of hold back, because they'll hear all sorts of untoward remarks during games. Speaking to on a slightly different side of it, speaking to people from Jack Grealish's family when he came back to Villa Park and Villa fans booed him, things like that really hurt as well. So it's tough for families. A lot of supporters, I think that it's great for them as well, because they're in the spotlight, and they're very well paid, etc. But it can be a tough old time. As watching the David Beckham documentary has showed me as well, with his mum speaking in there. It must be so difficult for family members when the going gets tough.
Yeah, it's nice to see them getting some enjoyment as well, and they must be so proud of what they're seeing at the moment. They've almost not chosen to be Villa fans. Like we've all I've chosen. Well, actually, I didn't really have a choice, but I'm a Villa fan because my dad's a Villa fan. That's why it's passed down. They're almost forced to follow this club up and down the country because they're member of their families playing for the club, and they just must absolutely love it as well. The McGinn one's a valid point. A year ago, his confidence must have been on the floor, and he was getting pelters, and there was questions asked of him. I can't sit here and say I didn't ask questions because I did, but I always felt there was a really, really good player there that was just being let down by the system that was around him. And I saw him at a Villa Foundation event, and I'd met him a couple of times before, and he was always really bubbly and really up, and he felt his body language just felt not right, and you could see he was low, and he'd come to see these fans, but he knowing really that had been getting abuse in the stands and stuff. And now, again, we're a world away from the McGinn of last season, and how he must be feeling and how his family must feel going to the game. So this is a special time at the moment. This is a time that Villa fans really need. You need to cherish this time, because it won't be like this forever.
No,
it does feel sustainable, but it won't be like this forever.
No, and look, it's important to enjoy it. I mentioned the word arrogance, and I meant that in a polite way. Arrogance, confidence, however you want to say it. But there aren't too many occasions as football supporters where you can have all this evidence of how good your team are and be able to back it up. You've got to roll with it and enjoy it, because, as you say, Dan, it doesn't happen. It's not going to happen every single season.
No,
they're going to be ups and downs.
All in unison. The fans are completely on board with what the manager and the team are doing. Maybe not so on board with some of the stuff off the pitch at the moment, but really, really on board with what the manager and the players are doing at the moment. They just love all round. The players love the fans love the players. The manager starts every interview talking about the fans, and
it's nice.
He's coached the fans. The manager has coached the fans, and I have never ever seen that happen before. I don't even know if I've seen that at any club, in all honesty, but I've definitely not seen it at Villa. So yeah, let's go. What a lovely, lovely podcast that was. Lovely 53 minutes I've had with you, Greg. Probably one of my favourite ones we've ever done. That really enjoyed it. We'll be back next week. Maybe we'll have a press box archive. Maybe we won't. Not sure.
Yes, I'm going to prepare for next week.
Look, he's already on it. But there'll be some more shows on the channel in the lead up to the game on Sunday against Nottingham Forest. So watch out for them, because we'd like you to watch them as well as this podcast. There has been some issues with audio platforms of our shows getting up. We've basically changed provider. I don't know the technical terms of what's gone on. So direct all your fury towards Adam Bates, not me, on Twitter in the DMs, because I don't really have a realistic answer for what's going on. But I think we've changed providers and there's been a bit of a breakdown somewhere. So we'll try and get that sorted as much as we can. But we're always up on YouTube if you are desperate to listen to the shows. Give the video or podcast a like wherever you've taken it in, and leave us a comment as well with your thoughts on the podcast. Did you agree with the stuff that Greg and myself were talking about on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast? Please subscribe. It really helps us grow and it helps us appear in places we may not always appear, and other people then notice us. So please help us by subscribing if you are watching the show. Greg and myself will be back next week. The preview show